Hashtag the hook. For 300 years, humanity had been the galaxy's punching bag. We were the species that got invaded, conquered, enslaved, and experimented on. The one that always lost. The one that always begged for mercy. The Galactic Council thought they had us figured out perfectly. Weak, emotional, predictable. They signed their precious Terran Protection Accord not out of kindness, but because even the galaxy's apex predators occasionally need something small and harmless to kick around. But here's the thing about cornered animals that every predator should remember. Push them far enough, hurt them deeply enough, and sometimes they stop running. Sometimes they bare their teeth. The Zephyrians learned this lesson exactly 47 minutes ago when they glassed New Geneva with its 6 billion souls, thinking humanity would simply file another complaint with the Council and wait patiently for justice that would never come. They were wrong. Admiral Sarah Chun stands on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the readings flood in from across human space. Every shipyard, every hidden fleet, every black site project that officially doesn't exist. All of it coming online simultaneously for the first time in 3 centuries. The galaxy is about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon was never our technology or our numbers. It was our ability to remember every slight, catalog every injustice, and plan for the day when patience finally runs out. Today, the Terran Protection Accord dies. Tomorrow, the galaxy learns what happens when humanity stops asking for permission. Admiral Sarah Chun had been dreaming of her daughter when the emergency klaxons shattered her sleep. The artificial gravity hummed beneath her feet as she stumbled toward the bridge, her mind still foggy with images of Emily's graduation ceremony 3 years ago. Emily, who lived on New Geneva with her husband and their twin boys. Emily, who sent weekly video messages that always ended with, "Love you, Mom. Stay safe out there." The bridge of the UES Retribution buzzed with controlled chaos. Officers moved between stations with practiced efficiency, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of tactical displays. But something was wrong. Sarah had commanded this ship for 8 years, and she could read her crew like a favorite book. Tonight, they moved like people who had seen something that broke their understanding of the universe. "Report," Sarah commanded, settling into her command chair. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like an old coat. Commander Marcus Vale turned from the communications station, his usually steady hands trembling slightly. "Admiral, we've received confirmation from multiple sources. New Geneva is gone." His voice cracked on the last word, and Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. "Gone? Define gone, Commander." Lieutenant Commander Torres stepped forward from the tactical station, her dark eyes hollow. "Orbital bombardment, ma'am. Complete atmospheric burn. Surface temperature readings are consistent with high-energy plasma weapons. No life signs detected on any scanner." The bridge fell silent except for the ambient hum of the ship's systems. Sarah gripped the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles went white. 6 billion people. Emily, the boys. Marcus, age 7. David, age 6. They just learned to ride bicycles. Ooh, the word came out as a whisper, but it carried the weight of thunder. "Zephyrian 2nd Fleet," Torres replied, consulting her display. They broadcasted a standard territorial reclamation notice 6 hours after the bombardment. Claimed New Geneva violated the mineral extraction protocols established under Section 47B of the Galactic Trade Compact. Sarah laughed, and the sound made her crew flinch. It was not a sound any of them had ever heard from their admiral before. Section 47B, of course, the same section that allows them to claim any human colony that discovers rare Earth deposits belongs to their empire. She stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Communications, connect me to Fleet Command immediately." "Already tried, Admiral," Vale said quietly. "We've been trying for the past hour. No response from Earth, Luna Command, or any of the outer system defense platforms." "What do you mean, no response?" Torres cleared her throat. "Ma'am, we're receiving automated distress beacons from 17 different human colonies. Bombardment patterns are consistent with coordinated Zephyrian fleet actions. It appears they hit us everywhere at once." Sarah closed her eyes and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, like a dam finally giving way after holding back a flood for too long. When she opened them again, her crew saw something they had never seen before in their admiral's gaze: the complete absence of restraint. Lieutenant Shun, she called to the young communications officer who shared her surname, but no relation. Send a priority message to every human vessel in this sector. Tell them to converge on these coordinates immediately. Ma'am, what should I tell them when they ask why? Tell them the Terran Protection Accord is void as of today. Tell them we're no longer asking the Galactic Council for permission to defend ourselves. Commander Vale stepped closer to her chair. Admiral, with respect, the Accord has kept humanity from another devastating war for 3 centuries. If we abandon it now, we might actually survive what comes next, Sarah interrupted. Marcus, how long has it been since the Zephyrians signed that document? 312 years, ma'am. 312 years of them slowly carving us apart, one colony at a time. 312 years of filing complaints with a council that treats us like an irritating insect. 312 years of watching our people die while we begged for scraps of justice. She turned to face the view screen, where the stars waited in their eternal silence. Well, I'm done begging. The next 12 hours transformed the bridge of the Retribution into something resembling a war council from humanity's ancient past. Ships began arriving from across the sector. Freighters, patrol vessels, mining platforms, even a few decommissioned military vessels that some enterprising captains had kept in working condition despite official orders to scrap them. Captain Janet Reeves of the merchant vessel Golden Dawn was the first to arrive, her weathered face appearing on the main screen with barely contained fury. Admiral, my brother lived on New Geneva with his family. For kids, what are your orders? Captain Reeves, are you prepared to void your merchant's license and face court-martial for treason against the Galactic Accords? Reeves smiled for the first time since learning of the attack. Ma'am, after what I saw in a news feed from New Geneva, I'm prepared to void a lot more than my license. One by one, more ships arrived. Captain Harrison Polk with his converted mining vessel, its industrial plasma cutters modified for purposes that would make council inspectors very nervous. Commander Lisa Park with the fast attack ship Wolverine, officially decommissioned but somehow still armed with its full complement of railguns. Lieutenant Colonel James Murphy with an entire battalion of Colonial Marines who had been conducting training exercises in the asteroid belt. Sarah watched the tactical display fill with friendly contacts and felt something she hadn't experienced since her academy days: hope backed by genuine strength. These weren't the carefully regulated forces allowed under the Terran Protection Accord. These were humans who had spent their entire lives being told they couldn't fight back, couldn't defend themselves, couldn't be anything more than the galaxy's designated victims. Admiral, Torres called from her station. We're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. Emergency session. They're demanding an explanation for unauthorized human fleet movements. Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These people had followed her through 7 years of humiliation and restraint, watching their fellow humans die while they filed reports and waited for justice that never came. Today, she was going to give them something different. Open the channel, but audio only. The pompous voice of Council Speaker Valdris filled the bridge, his translated words dripping with the authority of someone who had never been denied anything. Admiral Chun, you are in direct violation of the Terran Protection Accord. Disperse your fleet immediately and report to Council Station for disciplinary proceedings. Speaker Valdris, Sarah replied, her voice as calm as a still pond. I'm calling to inform the Council that humanity is formally withdrawing from the Terran Protection Accord, effective immediately. The pause that followed was so long that Lieutenant Chun checked to make sure the connection was still active. When Valdris finally spoke, his voice carried the tone of someone explaining basic mathematics to a particularly slow child. Admiral, you seem to be confused about the nature of the Accord. Humanity doesn't have the authority to withdraw for protective custody. The Council decided 3 centuries ago that your species lacks the emotional stability for self-governance. That decision remains in effect. Sarah smiled, and every person on the bridge felt a chill run down their spine. Speaker Valdris, let me clarify something for you. We're not asking for permission to leave. We're informing you that we already have. Admiral, I strongly advise you to reconsider this course of action. Without Council protection, humanity faces extinction within a matter of years. There are forces in this galaxy that would erase your species from existence for sport. You mean forces like the Zephyrian Second Fleet that murdered 6 billion of my people 12 hours ago? Forces like the Kavari Empire that has been systematically enslaving human colonies for the past 50 years while the Council investigated their activities? Forces like the Council itself, which has watched our people suffer and die while lecturing us about our emotional instability. Another long pause. When Valdres spoke again, his tone had shifted from condescending to genuinely puzzled. Admiral, surely you understand that the loss of New Geneva, while regrettable, was the result of their violation of established mining protocols. The Zephyrians were within their rights under Section 47B of the Trade Compact. Sarah felt that broken thing in her chest expand like a star going supernova. Speaker Valdres, let me share something with you. Humans have an old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. For 312 years, you've been fooling us. Today, the shame ends. Admiral, I'm not finished. Here's another human saying for your consideration. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Today, we're going to find out which category you fall into. Sarah gestured to Lieutenant Shun, who cut the transmission. The bridge remained silent for a moment before Commander Vale cleared his throat. Ma'am, that was arguably the most treasonous conversation in human history. Sarah nodded. Good. Communications. Patch me through to the entire fleet. All ships on the same channel. Admiral. Sarah stood and faced the view screen, knowing that her words would be heard by thousands of humans who had spent their entire lives being told they weren't allowed to fight back. This is Admiral Sarah Chun, speaking to all human vessels in this sector. 12 hours ago, the Zephyrian Second Fleet murdered 6 billion of our people on New Geneva. They did this not because we threatened them, not because we attacked them, but because we discovered rare earth deposits that they wanted to claim for themselves. She paused, letting that sink in. For over 3 centuries, we have followed the rules. We have filed complaints. We have waited for justice. We have watched our people die while bureaucrats in the Galactic Council explained why their deaths were legally justified under laws we had no voice in creating. Her voice grew stronger, carrying the weight of 300 years of accumulated rage. Today, that ends. Today, we stop asking permission to defend our families. Today, we stop pretending that creatures who view us as cattle have any legitimate authority over our lives. Sarah could see the communication lights blinking as dozens of ship captains tried to respond at once. She held up a hand for silence. I know what you're thinking. We're outnumbered. We're outgunned. We're facing an entire galaxy that views us as little more than an amusing pest. But here's what they don't understand about humans. We're not angry because we think we can win. We're angry because our children are dead, and someone needs to pay for that. The communication board lit up like a Christmas tree, but Sarah wasn't finished. In the next 48 hours, every human ship in this sector will receive coordinates and targeting data for Zephyrian military installations. We're going to hit them hard, fast, and without warning. We're going to make them understand that killing 6 billion humans has consequences they never bothered to calculate. She sat back down in her command chair, feeling the weight of history settling around her like armor. This is not a war we're going to win through superior firepower. This is a war we're going to win by being too expensive to ignore. When the galaxy looks at humanity, I want them to see a species that will burn everything they touch rather than submit to another day of managed extinction. The responses came flooding in then, voices of ship captains who have been waiting their entire careers for someone to give them permission to stop being victims. Captain Reeves was first, her voice tight with emotion. Admiral, the Golden Dawn is with you. My brother's kids deserved better than this galaxy gave them. The Wolverine is ready for combat operations. Admiral, Commander Park reported. My crew has some grievances to settle with the Zephyrians. One by one, every human vessel in the sector pledged their support. Mining ships, cargo haulers, patrol craft, even a luxury yacht whose owner had apparently been waiting his entire life for a chance to ram something expensive into his Zephyrian warship. Sarah listened to the voices of her people and felt something she hadn't experienced since the early days of the Terran Protection Accord. Unity of purpose. These weren't soldiers following orders. These were humans who had finally been given permission to fight back against a galaxy that had never bothered to see them as anything more than a resource to be managed. Fleet Command, she said finally, when the last ship had reported in, begin Phase 1 operations immediately. Target priority goes to Zephyrian supply depots, communication relays, and isolated patrol vessels. We're going to teach them that there's a difference between managing cattle and fighting humans. As her fleet began to move with deadly purpose through the void between stars, Sarah allowed herself one moment to remember Emily's face from that last video message. Her daughter had always been proud of her mother's service, even when that service meant filing reports instead of fighting battles. Today, Emily's children would be avenged, and the galaxy would learn that humanity's long patience had finally come to an end. The war for human dignity was about to begin. The first Zephyrian outpost died in complete silence, its destruction so swift and unexpected that the garrison never had time to send a distress signal. Captain Janet Reeves watched through the Golden Dawn's modified sensors as the facility's power core went critical, taking 17 Zephyrian soldiers and a small mountain with it. Clean detonation, her weapons officer reported, his voice still tinged with disbelief. Industrial mining charges work better than expected against their shield generators. Reeves nodded grimly. The Zephyrians had grown lazy during 3 centuries of human compliance. Their border outposts were designed to monitor and intimidate, not to withstand a determined assault from vessels they dismissed as harmless cargo haulers. Mark target destroyed, and move to the next waypoint. We have 6 more facilities to visit before dawn. Across the sector, similar scenes played out with mechanical precision. The human fleet that Admiral Chun had assembled might have looked like a collection of civilian vessels to casual observers, but that appearance was deliberately deceptive. Centuries of being forbidden from maintaining proper military forces had taught humanity to be creative with their definitions of civilian equipment. Commander Lisa Park's fast attack ship Wolverine swept through the Kepler 442 system like a ghost, her modified engines running so quietly that Zephyrian sensors registered nothing more threatening than background radiation. The 3 Zephyrian patrol ships guarding the system's primary shipping lane never saw her coming. Missile lock established on all 3 targets, her tactical officer whispered, as if speaking too loudly might alert their prey. Park studied the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Zephyrians floated in formation, completely unaware that death was stalking them through the void. Their ships were modern, well-armed, and crewed by professional soldiers. Under normal circumstances, they would have been more than a match for a single human vessel. But these weren't normal circumstances. These were the opening hours of a war the Zephyrians didn't know they were fighting. Fire. 3 railgun slugs launched simultaneously, each one accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed by magnetic fields that would have been impossible to generate without the industrial-grade power cores Park had borrowed from decommissioned mining platforms. The slugs covered the distance to their targets in less than 2 seconds, striking with enough kinetic energy to vaporize everything within a 100-meter radius of impact. The Zephyrian patrol ships simply ceased to exist, transformed from functioning warships into rapidly expanding clouds of superheated plasma and metal fragments. All targets neutralized, the tactical officer reported. No distress signals transmitted. Park allowed herself a tight smile. Set course for the communications relay at Proxima Station. Time to make sure the Zephyrians can't call for help when the real shooting starts. Meanwhile, deep in the asteroid belt of the Ross 128 system, Lieutenant Colonel James Murphy was discovering that his colonial Marines were very good at improvising explosive devices for mining equipment. His battalion had spent the past 6 months officially conducting training exercises among the asteroids, but their real purpose had been far more sinister. Colonel, demolition teams report ready on all marked asteroids, Sergeant Major Williams reported, her scarred face illuminated by the green glow of her tactical display. We've got 17 rocks prepped with fusion charges, all positioned along the main shipping corridor. Murphy nodded as he studied the holographic display showing the Zephyrian convoy's approach vector. 43 cargo ships carrying refined metals from the conquered territories, escorted by 6 destroyers and a heavy cruiser. Under the Terran Protection Accord, Such a convoy would have passed through human space without interference, paying token fees for safe passage while carrying wealth stolen from murdered human colonies. Today, they're going to learn about the concept of highway robbery, human style. Remember, we want the escorts eliminated quickly, but try to capture the cargo ships intact. Those supplies are going to fuel the next phase of our operations. Murphy checked his chronometer. Detonation in 30 seconds. All units, prepare for boarding actions. The Zephyrian convoy dropped out of hyperspace precisely on schedule, their navigation computers following shipping routes that had been safe for 300 years. The lead destroyer immediately began active scanning of the asteroid field, but their sensors were calibrated to detect ships, not carefully camouflaged explosive devices disguised as ordinary space rocks. Murphy smiled grimly as he watched the convoy enter the kill zone. Detonate. The asteroid field erupted in a chain reaction of nuclear fire that turned the shipping corridor into a maze of debris and radiation. The escort vessels, caught completely off guard, found themselves trapped between walls of superheated rock and metal, while human marines in powered armor launched themselves from hidden positions throughout the field. The battle was brief and brutal. Zephyrian destroyers, designed for ship-to-ship combat in open space, proved vulnerable to close-range attacks from soldiers who had been specifically trained to exploit their weaknesses. Within 20 minutes, the entire escort force had been neutralized, and human boarding parties were securing the cargo vessels. 43 ships secured, Colonel Williams reported as she supervised the evacuation of captured Zephyrian crew members. Cargo manifests show rare earth elements, processed metals, and... She paused, her expression darkening. Medical supplies that were supposed to be delivered to human colonies under the aid protocols. Murphy felt his jaw clench. Medical supplies that our people desperately need, being sold back to us at inflated prices by the same creatures who bombed our hospitals in the first place. What are your orders for the prisoners, sir? Murphy considered the question carefully. The old Terran Protection Accord would have required him to treat prisoners according to Galactic Council standards, ensuring their comfort and eventual repatriation. But the Accord was dead, and Murphy had no intention of letting the creatures who had profited from human suffering return to their comfortable lives. Strip them of all equipment and weapons, then load them into escape pods programmed for the nearest Zephyrian military base. Make sure they understand that the next human force they encounter might not be so generous with their lives. As human forces struck across multiple systems, the initial Zephyrian response was confusion rather than alarm. The attacks seemed random and uncoordinated to their military analysts, carried out by what appeared to be civilian vessels using improvised weapons. Most Zephyrian commanders assumed they were dealing with isolated incidents of human pirates or terrorists, nothing that required significant military response. That assumption proved costly when Admiral Chen's main fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly above the Zephyrian military base at Wolf 359. Target acquisition complete, Torres reported from her tactical station aboard the Retribution. 27 vessels in dock, including 3 heavy cruisers and a battleship. Chen studied the tactical display with satisfaction. Wolf 359 served as the primary staging area for Zephyrian operations in human space. Its facilities responsible for coordinating the systematic conquest of human colonies over the past century. The base was heavily defended, but its defenses were designed to repel conventional attacks by similarly equipped forces. Chen's fleet was anything but conventional. Communications. Open a channel to all human vessels. Channel open, Admiral. This is Admiral Chun to all ships. Today, we're going to send a message that will be heard across the galaxy. Every creature that has profited from human suffering needs to understand that their crimes have consequences. She paused, watching as her fleet moved into attack formation. Converted cargo haulers loaded with nuclear warheads. Mining ships whose plasma cutters have been weaponized far beyond their original specifications. Even a few luxury yachts whose owners had apparently decided that ramming speed was a valid military tactic. The Zephyrians believe that humans are emotional and unpredictable, that we lack the discipline for sustained military operations. Today, we're going to prove them right about the emotional part. But we're also going to show them that sometimes emotion is exactly what wins wars. The attack began with a coordinated bombardment from every human vessel capable of independent fire. Nuclear warheads detonated against Zephyrian shields, overwhelming their defensive systems through sheer volume rather than sophisticated targeting. Industrial plasma cutters sliced through armor plating that was never designed to withstand such focused applications of energy. Railgun slugs launched from improvised magnetic accelerators punched through hull plating with kinetic energies that defied traditional defensive calculations. The Zephyrian battleship Sovereign's Edge managed to launch a counterattack, its main guns targeting the largest human vessels with devastating effectiveness. The converted freighter New Horizon died in the first salvo, its crew of 43 volunteers vaporized in an instant. Captain Harrison Polk of the mining vessel Iron will watch his friend's ship die, and felt something break inside his chest. All power to forward plasma cutters. Ramming speed. Captain, at this range will be destroyed by our own weapon discharge, his first officer protested. Polk smiled grimly. That's the point. The Zephyrians think we're afraid to die. Time to correct that misconception. The Iron will accelerate directly toward the Sovereign's Edge, its industrial plasma cutters operating at maximum output. Zephyrian gunners poured fire into the approaching human vessel, but Polk had reinforced his ship's forward sections with salvaged armor plating from a dozen different sources. The Iron will absorb punishment that should have destroyed it 3 times over and kept coming. When the two ships collided, the explosion could be seen from 3 different star systems. The destruction of their battleship finally convinced the Zephyrian commander that he was facing something more serious than random pirate attacks. Admiral Corex activated the base's emergency protocols and sent out a priority distress signal to the Zephyrian Second Fleet. The signal never reached its destination. Commander Park's Wolverine had eliminated the communications relay 6 hours earlier, and the Zephyrians discovered too late that they were fighting in a complete information vacuum. Admiral, Torres called out over the sounds of battle. Enemy resistance is collapsing. Estimate complete facility destruction within 30 minutes. She nodded, but her attention was focused on a strategic display showing the positions of other human strike forces across the sector. Communications, connect me to all team leaders for Phase 2 coordination. The responses came in quickly. Captain Reeves reported successful elimination of 7 Zephyrian outposts and the capture of significant material supplies. Colonel Murphy confirmed the seizure of an entire cargo convoy and the establishment of a forward operating base in the asteroid field. Commander Park had destroyed 3 communications relays and was moving to intercept Zephyrian reinforcements before they could reach the main battle area. Excellent work, all teams, Chun said. Begin Phase 2 immediately. We've got 12 hours before the Zephyrians can coordinate a meaningful response. I want every military installation in this sector eliminated before they figure out what's happening. As human forces spread across multiple systems like a virus, striking targets that have been safe for centuries, the news began to reach other species throughout the galaxy. The initial reports seemed almost impossible to believe. Humans, the galaxy's designated victims, were conducting organized military operations against one of the major powers. Most alien observers assumed the reports were exaggerated. Humans have been confined to the role of peaceful farmers and miners for over 300 years. The idea that they could pose a serious military threat seemed absurd. That assumption began to crack when the first refugee ships started arriving at Galactic Council stations, filled with Zephyrian survivors telling stories of human attacks that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about Earth's children. They came out of nowhere, one Zephyrian officer reported to Council investigators. Civilian ships using weapons that shouldn't exist. They fought like creatures with nothing left to lose, accepting casualties that would break the morale of any rational species. Surely you're exaggerating, the Council investigator replied. Humans lack the emotional stability for sustained military operations. Their psychological profiles clearly indicate their psychological profiles are wrong, the officer interrupted. These weren't the humans we've been managing for the past 3 centuries. These were something else, something that remembers every injustice and plans for the day when patience runs out. Similar reports flooded in from across Zephyrian space as Admiral Chin's forces concluded their Phase 2 operations. Military bases that had controlled human colonies for decades lay in ruins. Supply convoys carrying wealth stolen from conquered worlds burned in the void. Communication networks that had coordinated the systematic oppression of humanity went silent one by one. By the time the Zephyrian High Command realized they were facing a genuine military uprising rather than isolated terrorist incidents, Qin's forces had already achieved their primary objective. The Zephyrian military infrastructure in the sector lay in ruins, and human vessels loaded with captured supplies were already moving toward Phase 3 targets. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the tactical displays that showed the complete elimination of Zephyrian military presence in 3-star systems. Her fleet had lost 11 ships and over 400 volunteers, but they had proven something that the galaxy had forgotten over the past 3 centuries. Humans could fight. More importantly, humans could win. Admiral, Lieutenant Chun called from the communication station. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Speaker Valdris wants to discuss terms for an immediate ceasefire. Chun smiled, and her crew felt that familiar chill run down their spines. Tell Speaker Valdris that humanity will consider ceasefire negotiations as soon as he explains how 6 billion dead humans on New Geneva represent acceptable collateral damage under his precious accords. The lieutenant paused. Ma'am, should I really tell him that? Word for word, Chun confirmed, and remind him that we're just getting started. As her message traveled toward Council space, Admiral Chun began planning Phase 3 of humanity's awakening. The Zephyrians had learned that humans could hurt them. Soon, the entire galaxy would discover what happened when a species that had been pushed too far finally stopped asking permission to defend itself. The age of human compliance was ending. The age of human fury had just begun. The Galactic Council emergency session convened in chaos, with representatives from 47 species all talking at once, while emergency broadcasts flooded in from across Zephyrian space. Speaker Valdris struggled to maintain order as holographic displays showed the systematic destruction of an entire military sector that had been pacified for over 3 centuries. Order! Order! Valdris's translator amplified his voice across the vast chamber. We will address this crisis in a civilized manner befitting our station as guardians of galactic peace. Ambassador Thex of the Kavari Empire raised one of her 4 arms, her chitinous features twisted in what passed for confusion among her species. Speaker Valdris, surely these reports are exaggerated. Humans lack the technological capability for such coordinated military action. The reports have been verified by multiple independent sources, replied Council Security Director Zane, his scaled features grim as he consulted his datapad. 17 Zephyrian military installations destroyed, 43 cargo convoys captured or eliminated, and over 2,000 casualties confirmed. The attacks appear to be coordinated by a single human command structure operating outside all established protocols. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Ambassador Corvex of the Hegemony Collective clicked his mandibles in what his species considered thoughtful consideration. Director Zane, are we certain these attacks are being carried out by actual humans? Perhaps another species is using human vessels to disguise their involvement. Negative, Ambassador. We have confirmed visual identification of human command personnel in multiple engagements. The attacks are definitely being coordinated by Earth's children. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For over 300 years, the Galactic Council had operated under the assumption that humanity was a managed species, grateful for protection and incapable of independent military action. The idea that humans might choose to abandon that protection and fight for themselves had never been seriously considered. Valdris cleared his throat, his confidence shaken, but his authority still intact. Regardless of how unexpected this development may be, we cannot allow a protected species to engage in unauthorized military operations. Director Zane, what forces do we have available to restore order? That's complicated, Speaker. The Council peacekeeping fleet is currently deployed across 17 different sectors dealing with various border disputes and resource conflicts. Our nearest available force is the 3rd Enforcement Squadron, but they're 6 days out from the affected area. Ambassador Thex leaned forward in her specialized seating unit. What about the Zephyrian response? Surely they have sufficient military assets to handle their own internal security problems. Director Zane consulted his datapad again, his expression growing more troubled. The Zephyrians have requested immediate military assistance from the Council. According to their reports, the human forces are using tactics and technologies that violate multiple provisions of the Galactic Warfare Conventions, such as kamikaze attacks using civilian vessels loaded with nuclear warheads, industrial equipment modified for military applications in direct violation of the Technology Control Accords, and Zane paused, checking his information twice before continuing. Systematic execution of prisoners who refuse to provide military intelligence. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Ambassador Corvex's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed this information. Impossible. Human psychological profiles clearly indicate they lack the emotional stability for such extreme measures. Their species is naturally inclined toward mercy and compassion, even toward their enemies. Perhaps our psychological profiles need updating, Director Zane replied dryly. Speaker Valdris stood, his imposing figure commanding attention from the assembled representatives. Regardless of how this situation developed, we cannot allow it to continue. The Terran Protection Accord exists specifically to prevent humans from engaging in the kind of destructive warfare that nearly led to their extinction 3 centuries ago. If we allow them to continue these attacks, we risk a return to the dark days when human military aggression threatened the stability of entire sectors. With respect, Speaker, interrupted a new voice from the Chamber's communications array, I don't think you understand the current situation. The Chamber fell silent as Admiral Sarah Chen's image appeared on the main holographic display. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, still wearing the uniform of the United Earth Space Command, but something in her bearing had changed fundamentally since her last official appearance before the Council. Admiral Chun, Valdris said carefully, you are in direct violation of your commission and the Terran Protection Accord. Surrender immediately and report to Council Station for disciplinary proceedings. Chun smiled, and every representative in the chamber felt an involuntary chill. Speaker Valdris, I'm not here to surrender. I'm here to inform you that the Terran Protection Accord is null and void as of yesterday. Humanity is withdrawing from Council protection and resuming our status as an independent species. Admiral, you seem to be confused about the legal framework governing your species. The Terran Protection Accord was not a treaty between equals. It was a guardianship arrangement designed to protect humanity from itself and others. You cannot simply withdraw from protective custody. Chen's smile grew colder. Actually, we can. Section 847 of the original Accord states that protection may be withdrawn if the protected species demonstrates both the capability and willingness to defend itself independently. I believe our recent actions in Zephyrian space constitute adequate demonstration of both. Valdris consulted his own datapad, his confidence wavering slightly. Section 847 was included as a theoretical provision. It was never intended to be invoked. The psychological evaluations of your species clearly indicate that we're emotionally unstable and prone to excessive violence, Chen interrupted. Yes, we've heard that assessment before. Recent events would seem to confirm its accuracy. Ambassador Thex leaned forward, her voice carrying the tone of someone explaining basic facts to a child. Admiral Chun, surely you understand that without Council protection, humanity faces extinction. There are species in this galaxy that would erase your people from existence simply for entertainment. You mean species like the Zephyrians, who murdered 6 billion of my people 12 hours ago for violating mining protocols we had no voice in creating? Or perhaps you're referring to species like the Kavari, who have been systematically enslaving human colonies for the past 50 years while the Council investigated their activities? The chamber fell silent as the accusations hung in the air. Ambassador Thex's chitinous features darkened with what might have been embarrassment. Those allegations are currently under review by the appropriate council committees. For 50 years, Chin said flatly. 50 years of reviews and investigations and committee meetings while my people died in Kavari labor camps. Tell me, Ambassador Thex, how many more decades of review do you need before you reach a conclusion? Speaker Valdris attempted to regain control of the conversation. Admiral, you are allowing emotion to cloud your judgment. The Council operates according to established procedures designed to ensure justice for all species. These procedures take time, but they guarantee fair treatment under galactic law. Chen laughed, and the sound made several representatives flinch visibly. Fair treatment? Speaker Valdris, let me share some statistics with you. Over the past 300 years, the Council has reviewed 14,847 formal complaints filed by human colonies regarding treatment by other species. Do you know how many of those complaints resulted in meaningful corrective action? Valdris remained silent. 0. Chen continued. Not one. In every single case, the Council determined that the other species was operating within their legal rights under various trade compacts, resource agreements, or territorial arrangements that humanity was never allowed to participate in negotiating. Director Zane cleared his throat. Admiral, while I understand your frustration with the pace of Council proceedings, you must understand that galactic law requires careful consideration of all perspectives. Hasty decisions could result in interspecies conflicts that would devastate entire sectors. Director Zane, let me ask you something. How many human colonies have been destroyed, conquered, or abandoned over the past century, while the Council carefully considered all perspectives? Zane consulted his data pad reluctantly. The exact number is difficult to calculate. Human expansion into contested territories often results in overlapping claims that require adjudication. The number is 437, Chen said quietly. 437 human colonies wiped out while bureaucrats debated whether our people had the right to exist on worlds we'd been farming for generations. The chamber fell silent again as representatives processed the implications of that number. Ambassador Corvex clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Admiral, even if your grievances have merit, surely you understand that military action is not the appropriate response. Violence only begets more violence. The proper course is to work within established systems. Ambassador Corvex, Chun interrupted, your species conquered and absorbed 47 different civilizations before joining the Council. The Kavari Empire built their entire society on the systematic exploitation of weaker species. The Zephyrians have never encountered a resource they weren't willing to kill for. But somehow, when humans finally decide to fight back against 3 centuries of systematic oppression, we're the ones who need lectures about violence. She leaned forward, her image seeming to focus directly on each representative in turn. Let me share something with you about human nature that your psychological profiles apparently missed. We have very long memories. Every slight, every injustice, every murdered colony gets cataloged and remembered. And sometimes when the accumulated weight of all that pain finally reaches a critical mass, we stop being the galaxy's designated victims. Valdris stood, attempting to reassert his authority. Admiral, regardless of past grievances, your current actions constitute a clear violation of galactic law. If you continue these attacks, the Council will have no choice but to authorize military intervention to restore order. Chen's smile returned, and this time it carried genuine warmth. Speaker Valdris, I was hoping you would say that. You see, there's something else your psychological profiles failed to mention about humans. When we're backed into a corner with nothing left to lose, we become extremely creative. What do you mean? I mean that while my fleet has been eliminating Zephyrian military installations, other human forces have been conducting similar operations across 7 different sectors. The Kavari slave processing centers in the Vega system are currently burning. The hegemony mining platforms that have been strip mining former human worlds are experiencing significant technical difficulties. Even a few Council observation posts that have been monitoring human activities a bit too closely have suffered unfortunate accidents. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives realized that the human uprising wasn't limited to a single sector. Director Zane's scaled features went pale as emergency reports flooded his communication systems. Admiral, Valdris said, his voice strained, you're describing acts of terrorism against multiple Council member species. Such actions could trigger a galactic war. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Yes, they could. But here's the interesting thing about wars, Speaker Valdris. They're only profitable when one side has something to lose and the other side has something to gain. Right now, humanity has nothing left to lose. Our people are dying anyway, just slowly and quietly while you file reports about our emotional instability." She gestured to something off-screen, and the holographic display shifted to show tactical readouts from across human space. "But we do have something to gain. For the first time in 3 centuries, we have the opportunity to die fighting for our freedom instead of waiting patiently for the next bureaucratic decision about which of our colonies gets sacrificed for the greater good." Ambassador Thex raised one of her arms hesitantly. "Admiral, surely you understand that a war between humanity and the rest of the galaxy would result in your species' complete extinction. You lack the military resources to sustain such a conflict." "You're absolutely right, Ambassador. We can't win a conventional war against the galaxy. But we don't need to win. We just need to make the cost of defeating us higher than the benefit of keeping us under control." Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "You see, there's something fascinating about human psychology that your experts never bothered to study. When we're truly angry, I mean genuinely, completely enraged, we stop caring about survival and start focusing on making sure our enemies pay the highest possible price for their victory." She gestured again, and the display showed images of human civilian vessels being retrofitted with nuclear weapons and industrial equipment modified for military applications. Every human ship in space is now a potential weapons platform. Every human colony is a potential base of operations. Every human citizen is a potential soldier who's willing to die just to make your victory more expensive. Speaker Valdris stared at the images, his confidence finally beginning to crack. "Admiral, you're describing a strategy that would require your entire species to embrace martyrdom. Surely you're not suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything, Speaker. I'm informing you. The age of human compliance is over. If you want to maintain control over our species, you're going to have to fight for it. And we're going to make that fight cost you more than you ever imagined." Chen stepped back, her image preparing to fade. "Speaker Valdris, you have 48 hours to consider humanity's formal withdrawal from the Terran Protection Accord. After that, we begin Phase 4 of our independence operations." "What's Phase 4? Director Zane asked, though his expression suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Chen's smile returned one final time. "Phase 4 is when we stop limiting our targets to military installations and start teaching the galaxy what happens when you make humans truly angry." The holographic display went dark, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Representatives stared at each other with a growing realization that everything they thought they knew about humanity had just been proven catastrophically wrong. Speaker Valdris sat down heavily, his mind racing as he tried to process the implications of what he had just heard. For 300 years, the council had operated under the assumption that humans were a managed species, grateful for protection and incapable of serious resistance. That assumption had just died along with 6 billion people on New Geneva, and the galaxy was about to discover what 3 centuries of accumulated human rage looked like when it finally found a target. The attack on Council Station Meridian came without warning, appearing on sensor screens as nothing more than a routine freight delivery that had been scheduled weeks in advance. The station's security chief, a methodical Centauri named Crix, watched the approaching vessel with the bored attention of someone who had overseen thousands of such deliveries during his 20-year career. Transport vessel Helena requesting docking clearance at Base 7. The communication came through in perfect Standard Galactic, spoken by someone whose accent suggested core world education and proper council training. "Clearance granted, Helena. Proceed to Base 7 for standard cargo processing," Crix replied, already turning his attention to other routine matters. Council Station Meridian served as a major diplomatic hub, processing representatives and supplies for 17 different sectors. Nothing interesting ever happened there. That assumption proved fatal when the Helena's cargo hold opened to reveal not shipping containers, but 200 human soldiers in powered armor, armed with weapons that definitely weren't standard civilian equipment. "This is Colonel Sarah Martinez, Colonial Marines," the lead figure announced as her troops poured out of the transport. "Council Station Meridian is now under human control. All personnel will remain calm and follow instructions, and no one needs to die today." Security Chief Crix stared at his monitors in disbelief as human soldiers moved through the station with military precision, neutralizing security systems and controlling key choke points with an efficiency that spoke of extensive planning and intelligence gathering. "This is impossible," he muttered, reaching for his emergency communicator. "Humans don't have the capability for this kind of operation." The communicator was shot out of his hand by a precision blast that left his fingers intact but destroyed the device completely. Colonel Martinez appeared in his security office doorway, her weapon trained on him with casual competence. "Security Chief Crix, I presume," she said pleasantly. "We're going to need your cooperation to ensure this transition goes smoothly." "What transition?" Crix demanded, his scaled features flushed with outrage. "This is an act of war against the Galactic Council. You cannot simply occupy a diplomatic facility." Martinez smiled, and Crix felt his blood run cold. "Actually, we can. You see, Council Station Meridian was built using materials and labor confiscated from human colonies under various resource allocation protocols. By our calculations, we're simply repossessing stolen property." She gestured to one of her soldiers, who handed her a data pad. "According to our records, the rare Earth elements in your main power core were extracted from the Kepler-438 system after the Council declared the human colony there to be in violation of territorial agreements. They were never allowed to participate in negotiating. The titanium in your hull plating came from the Gliese 581 mining operation, which was seized from human colonists who had been working those asteroids for 40 years. Martinez's expression grew colder as she continued reading. "Even the food being served in your diplomatic cafeterias includes protein stocks that were originally destined for human colonies before being redirected through Council resource allocation protocols. So you see, Chief Crix, we're not really occupying your station. We're just taking back what was stolen from us." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as Phase 4 of humanity's independence operations unfolded with devastating precision. Human forces that had spent decades being dismissed as civilians and farmers revealed themselves to be anything but harmless, striking targets that had been considered absolutely safe for centuries. The Kavari Imperial Embassy on New Babylon burned for 3 days, its elegant spires reduced to twisted metal by bombs that investigators later determined had been planted by the very human maintenance workers who had been servicing the building for years. Ambassador Thex herself barely escaped the conflagration, rescued by emergency services while clutching classified documents that would later reveal the full extent of Kavari involvement in human slave operations. The Zephyrian Trade Commission headquarters on Arcturus Station suffered what appeared to be a catastrophic systems failure that left their entire administrative network corrupted beyond repair. Investigators eventually discovered that human technicians had been systematically introducing malicious code into their computer systems for over 2 years, waiting for the signal to activate dormant viruses that would destroy decades of carefully maintained records. But perhaps the most shocking attack came when the Hegemony Collective's primary industrial complex in the Tau Ceti system simply vanished in a flash of nuclear fire that could be seen from 3 neighboring star systems. The explosion was so massive that scientists initially assumed it was the result of a natural disaster, until analysis of the debris revealed the distinctive radiation signature of human military-grade fusion weapons. Director Zane stood in the Council Chamber's Emergency Command Center, watching holographic displays that showed the systematic destruction of targets across 17 sectors. The scale and coordination of the human attacks defied everything the Council thought it knew about Earth's military capabilities. "This is impossible," he muttered for the 100th time that day, studying tactical reports that made no sense according to official assessments of human technology and organization. "They don't have the resources for operations of this scope." "Apparently they do," Speaker Valdris replied grimly, reviewing casualty reports from across Council space. "The humans have been planning this for years, possibly decades. They've infiltrated our facilities, corrupted our networks, and positioned themselves to strike at targets we never considered vulnerable." Ambassador Corvex clicked his mandibles nervously as he processed the strategic implications. "Speaker, we need to authorize immediate military response. Every hour we delay allows the humans to consolidate their positions and prepare for the next phase of their operations." "What military response?" Director Zane asked bitterly. The 3rd Enforcement Squadron was supposed to restore order in Zephyrian space. They never made it to their assigned targets. Human forces ambushed them in the Vega system and destroyed the entire squadron with converted mining equipment and improvised weapons. The chamber fell silent as representatives processed the magnitude of the disaster. A full council military squadron, equipped with the most advanced weapons and defensive systems available, had been eliminated by creatures they had dismissed as technologically primitive farmers and miners. How is this possible? Ambassador Thex demanded, her chitinous features still bearing scorch marks from her escape from the embassy bombing. Our intelligence assessments clearly indicated that humans lack the industrial capacity for sustained military operations. Our intelligence assessments were wrong, Valdris replied flatly. The humans have been maintaining hidden industrial capabilities for decades, possibly centuries. Every civilian facility we allowed them to operate has apparently been serving dual purposes. He gestured to the holographic display showing the Helena, still docked at Council Station Meridian despite repeated demands for its removal. That transport vessel was built in human shipyards using materials we approved for civilian construction. According to our records, it's equipped for standard cargo operations and completely unarmed. But it just delivered 200 soldiers and enough military equipment to capture one of our most secure facilities, Director Zane noted. Because the humans have been lying to us for centuries about their actual capabilities, Valdris said. Every ship we allowed them to build, every facility we permitted them to operate, every piece of technology we approved for their use, all of it has been serving dual purposes we never bothered to investigate. Ambassador Corvex shifted uncomfortably in his specialized seating. Speaker, are you suggesting that the humans have been deliberately deceiving the Council for centuries? I'm suggesting that we've been so focused on managing them as a primitive species that we never considered the possibility they might be managing us instead. The truth of Valdris's statement became clear when Admiral Chen's next transmission reached Council space. This time, she appeared on screens across the galaxy simultaneously, her signal somehow overriding every major communication network with ease that suggested extensive preparation and system infiltration. Citizens of the galaxy, she began, her uniform now bearing insignia that no council analyst had ever seen before. My name is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Human Defense Force. Over the past 72 hours, human forces have conducted precision strikes against military and industrial targets belonging to species that have systematically oppressed our people for over 3 centuries. The transmission showed footage from the various attacks, including the destruction of Kavari slave processing centers, the elimination of Zephyrian military bases, and the capture of council facilities across multiple sectors. The images were broadcast with crystal clarity, impossible to dismiss as propaganda or exaggeration. For 300 years, we have filed complaints through proper channels while our people died in slave camps. Our colonies were seized through legal technicalities, and our children grew up as second-class citizens in a galaxy that treated us as livestock to be managed rather than people deserving of basic dignity. Chen's expression grew harder as she continued. We are not asking for sympathy. We are not requesting understanding. We are informing the galaxy that the age of human compliance is permanently over. The transmission shifted to show human industrial facilities that have been hidden from council inspectors for decades. Massive shipyards producing vessels that bore no resemblance to the civilian craft that appeared in official records. Weapons factories that have been disguised as food processing plants. Military training facilities that have been operating beneath the surface of supposedly peaceful agricultural colonies. The Galactic Council believes that humans lack the emotional stability for self-governance, Chen continued. They are correct. We are emotionally unstable. We remember every injustice, catalog every slight, and plan for the day when our patience finally runs out. Images flashed across the screen showing human colonies that have been destroyed over the past century, families torn apart by Kavari slave raids, children who had grown up in camps because their parents had violated territorial agreements they were never allowed to negotiate. That day has arrived, Chen said simply. We are withdrawing from all council protections, all treaty obligations, and all pretense that we consider the current galactic order to have any legitimate authority over our species. The transmission showed tactical displays of human military positions across 17 sectors, forces that had materialized seemingly from nowhere, but were clearly the result of decades of careful preparation. The numbers were staggering. Millions of humans who had apparently been training for this moment while maintaining the appearance of peaceful compliance. To the Galactic Council, we offer this final communication. Humanity is now an independent species with a demonstrated capability to defend our interests through military force. Any attempt to restore the previous order through coercion will be met with escalating responses until the cost of victory becomes unacceptable to all involved parties. Chen stepped closer to the camera, her expression carrying the weight of 3 centuries of accumulated grievances. To the species that have profited from human suffering, we offer this warning. We have very long memories and very creative imaginations when it comes to revenge. Your choices now are to accept our independence and negotiate as equals, or to discover what 300 years of suppressed human rage looks like when it finally finds appropriate targets. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving screens across the galaxy displaying nothing but static. In the council chamber, representatives stared at each other with a growing realization that everything they thought they knew about the Galactic Order had just changed forever. Speaker Valdris broke the silence first. Director Zane, what are our options for military response? Zane consulted his datapad with the expression of someone reading his own obituary. Limited, Speaker. The humans have demonstrated the capability to strike targets we considered absolutely secure. They've infiltrated our communication networks, compromised our intelligence systems, and positioned military assets in locations we never thought to monitor. But surely we have sufficient firepower to overwhelm their forces if we mobilize the full Council military. That's unclear. The human forces we've observed represent a level of military organization and technological capability that doesn't match our assessments of their industrial base. Either our intelligence has been fundamentally flawed for centuries, or what? Director Zane looked up from his datapad with the expression of someone who had just realized he was standing in a minefield. Or the humans have been maintaining hidden industrial and military capabilities far beyond anything we permitted them to develop, which would suggest a level of deception and long-term planning that calls into question everything we think we know about their species. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If the humans have been secretly preparing for this moment for decades or centuries, then every interaction, every treaty negotiation, every council decision regarding their species have been made based on fundamentally false assumptions. Ambassador Thex raised one of her arms hesitantly. Speaker, what do we do now? Valdris stared at the static-filled displays that had just carried Admiral Chen's ultimatum to every corner of the galaxy. For 300 years, the Galactic Council had operated under the assumption that humans were grateful for protection and incapable of serious resistance. That assumption had just died along with thousands of council personnel across 17 sectors, and the galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you never bothered to take seriously. 6 months after Admiral Chen's ultimatum, the galaxy had learned to fear the sight of human ships dropping out of hyperspace. The United Human Defense Force had grown from a handful of converted civilian vessels into a military organization that controlled trade routes, mining operations, and strategic positions across 12 sectors. What had begun as revenge for New Geneva had evolved into something far more dangerous: the systematic replacement of the Galactic Order that had oppressed humanity for 3 centuries. Admiral Chun stood in the command center of Retribution Station, humanity's first independent military base, built from the salvaged remains of 17 different council facilities. The irony was not lost on her that the station's hull plating had been forged from metals originally stolen from human colonies, now serving as the foundation for humanity's emergence as a galactic power. Admiral, Commander Torres reported from the Strategic Planning Station, long-range sensors are detecting the Kavari Imperial Fleet massing in the Rigel system. 47 heavy cruisers, 12 battleships, and their flagship Eternal Dominion. Chen nodded grimly. For months, the various alien species had been content to file diplomatic protests, while human forces systematically dismantled the infrastructure of oppression that had controlled Earth's children for centuries. But the liberation of the Kavari slave camps in the Vega system had apparently crossed a line that even the galaxy's most patient predators couldn't ignore. Numbers on the liberated populations? Over 2 million humans freed from various labor camps and processing facilities, Torres replied. Medical teams report that many of them have been in captivity for generations. Some families have been enslaved so long they don't remember their original colony names. Chun felt that familiar rage building in her chest, the same fury that had driven her to declare war on the galaxy 6 months ago. The Kavari had built their entire economy on the systematic exploitation of lesser species, with human colonies serving as their primary source of skilled labor. The camps they operated were efficient, profitable, and completely legal under Galactic Council regulations. They were also obscene violations of every principle that made life worth living, operated by creatures who viewed humans as useful livestock rather than people deserving of basic dignity. Communications. Open a channel to all human fleet commanders, Chun ordered. It's time for Phase 5. The responses came quickly from across human space. Captain Reeves, now commanding a squadron of heavily armed merchant vessels that had proven devastatingly effective against traditional military targets. Colonel Murphy, whose Marine battalions had become the nightmare of occupation forces across 7 systems. Commander Park, whose fast attack ships had earned a reputation for appearing impossibly quickly wherever the enemy least expected them. Fleet commanders. Chun began when all connections were established. Our intelligence networks have confirmed what we've suspected for months. The alien species are finally organizing a coordinated military response to our independence operations. She gestured to the tactical display, showing enemy force concentrations across multiple sectors. The Kavari Imperial Fleet, the Zephyrian 2nd and 4th Armies, Hegemony Collective Battle Groups, and even some Council Enforcement Squadrons. Approximately 4,000 vessels total, commanded by Admiral Thex herself. Captain Reeves whistled softly. That's enough firepower to glass every human colony in space, Admiral. Are we looking at evacuation protocols? Chun smiled, and her commanders felt that familiar mixture of pride and terror that came from serving under someone who had completely abandoned the concept of acceptable losses. Quite the opposite, Captain. We're looking at the opportunity we've been waiting for since this war began. Mom, Colonel Murphy asked, his scarred features reflecting genuine puzzlement. Think about it strategically, Chun explained. For 6 months, we've been fighting a guerrilla war against an enemy that outnumbers us 1,000 to 1. We've won individual battles by being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than our opponents expected. But guerrilla wars don't end with the guerrillas taking control of the galaxy. They end with negotiated settlements that leave the fundamental power structures intact. She leaned forward, her expression intense. But if we can destroy the combined alien fleet in a single engagement, we don't just win our independence. We establish humanity as the dominant military force in this galaxy. We become a species that everyone else has to negotiate with, instead of being the species that begs for scraps of justice. Commander Park raised an eyebrow. Admiral, that's a beautiful strategic vision, but we're talking about 4,000 enemy vessels against maybe 300 human ships. Even with our technological advantages, those odds are mathematically impossible. Only if we fight the kind of war they're expecting, Chun replied. But we're not going to do that. We're going to fight the kind of war that humans excel at, the kind where victory goes to whoever is willing to pay the highest price. Over the next 72 hours, human forces across the galaxy began implementing the most audacious military operation in recorded history. Every human vessel, from massive battlecruisers to tiny courier ships, converged on a single system that most galactic maps didn't even bother to name. The Charybdis system contained nothing of strategic value except for one crucial feature, a binary pulsar that made hyperspace navigation extremely hazardous for conventional vessels. Human ships, however, had been modified with navigation systems that incorporated technology the aliens had dismissed as primitive and unreliable. Earth's children had learned to fly through cosmic hazards that would disable or destroy vessels dependent on standard galactic navigation protocols. All human vessels. This is Admiral Chun aboard Retribution Station, came the broadcast as the improvised fleet took position among the gravitational anomalies that made the Charybdis system a navigator's nightmare. Today, we're going to teach the galaxy a lesson that will be remembered for the next 1,000 years. The human fleet that gathered in Charybdis bore little resemblance to the scattered collection of converted civilian vessels that had started the war 6 months earlier. Massive battleships that had been constructed in secret shipyards using materials salvaged from conquered alien facilities. Carrier vessels launching fighter squadrons equipped with weapons that violated multiple galactic warfare conventions. Even civilian transports have been modified into missile platforms carrying nuclear warheads that could crack the hull of any known alien vessel. Remember, Chun continued, we're not just fighting for our own freedom today. We're fighting for every species that has ever been classified as managed or protected by creatures who view civilization as a resource extraction operation. Today, the galaxy learns that some prey animals have claws. The alien fleet dropped out of hyperspace precisely on schedule, their formation a masterwork of military precision that spoke to centuries of experience in fleet operations. Admiral Thex commanded from the bridge of Eternal Dominion, her chitinous features reflecting confidence born from commanding superior numbers and firepower. Long-range sensors confirm human fleet positions, her tactical officer reported. Approximately 300 vessels of various classes, positioned in defensive formation around the system's primary star. Thex studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The human position made no strategic sense. They had trapped themselves in a gravity well that would prevent effective retreat while offering no meaningful defensive advantages. After 6 months of frustrating guerrilla warfare, she was finally facing an enemy willing to stand and fight like civilized beings. Signal the fleet to advance in standard battle formation, she ordered. Today we end this rebellion and restore proper order to the galaxy. The alien fleet moved forward with ponderous inevitability, their heavy warships spreading into attack formation as they approached the human defensive line. Conventional wisdom suggested that the battle would be over within hours, with human resistance collapsing under the weight of superior firepower and numbers. Conventional wisdom had failed to account for the fact that humans had never been particularly interested in fighting conventional battles. Range to target, 2 million kilometers, the human tactical officer aboard Retribution Station reported. All vessels, Chun broadcast, execute Ragnarok protocol on my mark. Across the human fleet, captains who had spent their entire lives being told they were too emotional and unpredictable to be trusted with serious military responsibility prepared to prove their alien critics absolutely correct. Mark, the human fleet exploded, not from enemy fire, but from coordinated detonation of their own ships. Every human vessel in the Charybdis system simultaneously activated self-destruct charges that had been carefully positioned to channel the explosive force in specific directions. Hundreds of nuclear fireballs erupted in sequence, their combined energy focused into a coherent wave of destruction that swept across the system like the wrath of an angry god. The alien fleet, caught completely off guard by what appeared to be mass suicide, had no time to react before the shockwave reached them. Ships that had been designed to withstand conventional weapons fire were overwhelmed by energies that exceeded anything in their defensive calculations. Hull, plating vaporized, shields collapsed, and entire sections of the alien formation simply ceased to exist. Admiral Thex watched in horror as her magnificent fleet was consumed by fires that shouldn't have been possible. "What are they doing?" she demanded, her voice breaking as the tactical display showed the systematic destruction of everything she had built her career around. Her science officer, one of the few aliens who had bothered to study human psychology beyond the basic council assessments, answered quietly. "They're proving a point, Admiral. They're demonstrating that humans would rather destroy themselves than accept defeat. But that's insane. They're all dead. How is that a victory?" The science officer pointed to his display, which showed energy readings from the expanding fireballs that were still consuming what remained of both fleets. "They're not all dead, Admiral. Look at the energy patterns. Some of those explosions were shaped charges, designed to create directional force rather than pure destruction." As the immediate chaos of the initial explosions faded, Admiral Thex began to understand the true horror of what she was witnessing. Hidden among the nuclear firestorms that had consumed the human fleet were smaller vessels. Human ships that had somehow survived the coordinated self-destruction by positioning themselves in carefully calculated safe zones. These survivors were not running from the battle. They were accelerating directly toward the crippled remains of the alien fleet, their hulls glowing with heat from passage through the radioactive debris of their own destroyed ships. Impossible d'expérimenter. No one would sacrifice hundreds of ships just to position a few dozen vessels for close-range attacks. Humans would, her science officer replied grimly. They've just demonstrated that they consider their own lives acceptable losses if it means inflicting maximum damage on their enemies. Admiral, I recommend immediate retreat. We're facing an enemy that has abandoned every rational calculation of acceptable risk. But retreat was no longer an option. The human survivors were already among the alien formation, their weapons firing at point-blank range while their hulls began to overheat from radiation exposure. These weren't conventional warships. They were living bombs, piloted by crews who had volunteered for certain death in exchange for the opportunity to take as many alien vessels with them as possible. The Battle of Charybdis lasted 14 minutes from the first explosion to the final silence. When it was over, the combined alien fleet that had represented the military might of a dozen species had been reduced to slowly expanding clouds of radioactive debris. Of the 4,000 alien vessels that had entered the system, fewer than 300 survived, most of them too damaged to pose any meaningful threat to human interests. The human fleet had been completely destroyed. Every ship, every station, every piece of military hardware that humanity had assembled over the past 6 months had been sacrificed in those 14 minutes of coordinated annihilation. And yet, somehow, humanity had won. The news of the Battle of Charybdis spread across the galaxy within hours, carried by the few alien survivors who managed to limp home with their tale of species so committed to victory that they would gladly embrace extinction rather than accept defeat. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Species that had viewed humans as manageable livestock suddenly found themselves facing the possibility that their protected wards were actually the galaxy's most dangerous predators, held in check only by their own restraint rather than alien supervision. Speaker Valdris received the news while reviewing casualty reports from the latest series of human raids on Council installations. The numbers were already staggering. Over 50,000 Council personnel killed or missing, vital infrastructure destroyed across 17 sectors, and now the complete elimination of the largest alien military force assembled in over a century. Director Zane, he said quietly, what are our remaining military options? Zane consulted his reports with the expression of someone who had just realized he was standing at the edge of an abyss. Limited, Speaker. The Battle of Charybdis demonstrated that humans are willing to accept casualties that would be psychologically impossible for any rational species. Even if we mobilize every remaining vessel in Council space, there's no guarantee we can achieve victory against an enemy that treats suicide attacks as standard tactical doctrine. But surely they can't sustain such losses indefinitely. They destroyed their entire fleet in that one engagement. That's what we thought 6 months ago, and somehow they rebuilt from nothing into a force capable of challenging the galaxy's major powers. Speaker, I don't think we can predict anything about human capabilities based on conventional assumptions. Valdris stared at the tactical displays showing the aftermath of Charybdis. In 14 minutes, humanity had simultaneously demonstrated their military inadequacy and their absolute supremacy. They had lost everything and won everything, proving that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to accept the rules of the game. Director, prepare a message to Admiral Chun. If she survived the battle. What message, Speaker? Valdris closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 3 centuries of assumptions crashing down around him. Tell her that the Galactic Council is prepared to discuss terms for humanity's recognition as an independent species. Tell her that we're ready to negotiate as equals. And if she demands reparations for the centuries of oppression, if she wants trials for Council officials who participated in the management of